My name is Naomi, and I'm 65 years old. Just 3 hours ago, I was standing outside my son's house in the pouring rain, clutching my small suitcase with trembling hands. The words he spoke to me keep echoing in my mind, like a broken record. "We don't have space for you. Get out." Those 7 words from the child I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, cut deeper than any knife ever could. As I stood there on his doorstep, part of me still hoped he would change his mind, that he would remember all the nights I stayed awake when he was sick, all the dreams I gave up so he could chase his. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if this story touches your heart. Trust me, what happened next will show you that sometimes the people we love most can teach us the hardest lessons about our own worth. Let me take you back 6 months, when everything seemed so different, so full of promise. My husband Frank had passed away 3 years earlier after a long battle with cancer, leaving me alone in our little 2-bedroom house on Maple Street. The house felt enormous without his laughter filling the rooms, and the silence was becoming unbearable. That's when my son Michael called with what seemed like a perfect solution. Michael was 42, a successful software engineer with a beautiful family. His wife Patricia was a marketing coordinator, and they had 2 precious children, Emma, who was 8, and little Lucas, who was 6. When Michael suggested I sell the house and move in with them, my heart leaped with joy. "Mom, it makes perfect sense," he said during that phone call that changed everything. "You can help with the kids when Patricia and I are at work, and we can all save money. Plus, the kids would love having their grandmother around more." The idea filled me with such hope. After 3 years of eating dinner alone and watching television by myself, the thought of being surrounded by family again felt like a dream come true. I imagined helping Emma with her homework, teaching Lucas how to bake cookies, the way I taught Michael when he was little, and having real conversations with adults again, instead of talking to Frank's photograph every morning. The process of selling my house went smoother than expected. The real estate market was strong, and I got a good price for the little home Frank and I had shared for 37 years. I donated most of our furniture to charity, keeping only the essentials and a few precious mementos. Everything I owned fit into just a few boxes and suitcases. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to give up my independence so completely. But at the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Moving day arrived on a sunny Saturday in early spring. Michael and Patricia seemed genuinely excited as they helped me settle into what would be my new home. They had converted part of their finished basement into a small apartment for me, complete with a bedroom, a tiny sitting area, and a small bathroom. "It's perfect for privacy," Patricia said with a bright smile, and I agreed wholeheartedly. The space was cozy and clean, and I felt grateful that they had gone to such trouble to make me comfortable. Those first 2 weeks were everything I had dreamed of. I woke up each morning to the sound of children's laughter upstairs. Emma would bound down to my little apartment before school, chattering about her friends and showing me her latest drawings. Lucas was more shy, but he loved when I read him stories in the evenings. I cooked dinner for the family several times using recipes that had been in our family for generations. Patricia complimented my cooking, and Michael hugged me, telling me how happy he was to have me there. I felt useful again, needed again. When Patricia had to work late, I was there to pick up the children from their after-school programs. When Michael had an important presentation, I made sure his favorite breakfast was waiting for him. The house felt alive with the energy of a multi-generational family, and I thought I had finally found my place in this new chapter of my life. But as the 3rd week began, I started noticing subtle changes that made my stomach flutter with unease. Patricia's smiles seemed a little more forced, her conversations with me a little shorter. It started with something as simple as the refrigerator. I had reorganized it the way I always had at home, with leftovers on the top shelf and fresh vegetables in the crisper drawers clearly labeled. When I came upstairs one morning, Patricia was standing in front of the open fridge with her hands on her hips. "Naomi, I can't find anything in here," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I've had my system for years, and now everything is different." I quickly apologized and offered to help her find what she needed, but the damage was done. I could see the irritation in her eyes, and it made me feel like an intruder in what I thought was becoming my home too. The first real conflict came a few days later. Emma had been having trouble with her math homework, and I had been helping her work through the problems at the kitchen table. She was getting frustrated, so I gave her a small piece of chocolate to cheer her up. It was something I used to do with Michael when he was struggling with schoolwork. But when Patricia came home and saw Emma eating the candy just before dinner, her reaction was swift and sharp. "Emma, you know the rule about sweets before meals," Patricia said, then turned to me with barely concealed anger. "Naomi, I need you to check with me before giving the children anything. We have very specific rules about their diet and routine." The embarrassment burned in my cheeks as Emma looked confused, caught between her mother's disapproval and my well-intentioned gesture. That night, I could hear Patricia and Michael talking in their bedroom upstairs. The walls were thin, and their voices carried down to my basement apartment. "I feel like I'm being undermined in my own home," Patricia was saying. "She means well, but she doesn't understand how we do things here. The kids are getting mixed messages." Michael's response was what hurt the most. Instead of defending me or suggesting we all sit down and talk through the issues, he simply said, "I'll talk to her tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went, and he never said a word to me about it. Instead, he just seemed to become more distant, always busy with work calls or projects that kept him from having real conversations with me. I started spending more time in my basement apartment, trying to give the family space and avoid causing any more problems. When I heard them laughing together upstairs during dinner, I felt a pang of loneliness that reminded me too much of those quiet evenings after Frank died. The difference was that now I was surrounded by family, but somehow felt more isolated than ever. Emma still came to visit me in the evenings, but now she would look around nervously, as if she was doing something wrong. "Grandma, are you sad?" she asked me one night as I tucked her into bed. Her innocent question broke my heart because I realized that even the children could sense the growing tension in the house. "No, sweetheart," I lied, kissing her forehead. "Grandma is just adjusting to living somewhere new." But inside, I was beginning to understand that I had made a terrible mistake. The family dynamic had been perfect before I arrived, and my presence was disrupting the balance they had worked so hard to create. Patricia began leaving little notes around the house, polite but pointed reminders about their family routines and preferences. "Please remember that we do laundry on Sundays. The children have quiet time from 4 to 5 p.m. We prefer organic snacks for the kids." Each note felt like a small rejection, a reminder that I didn't really belong in their carefully organized world. As the fourth week turned into the fifth, the situation deteriorated rapidly. What had started as minor irritations escalated into a constant undercurrent of tension that affected everyone in the house. I could see it in the way Patricia's jaw tightened when I entered the kitchen while she was cooking. I could feel it in the way Michael avoided making eye contact with me during our increasingly rare family dinners. The breaking point came when I overheard a phone conversation that I was never meant to hear. I had been in the laundry room folding the few clothes I had washed when Patricia's voice drifted down from the kitchen above. She was talking to her mother, and her words cut through me like shattered glass. "Mom, I don't know what to do," Patricia was saying, her voice strained with frustration. "I feel like a prisoner in my own home. She's always there, always watching, always trying to help with things I don't need help with. I can't even discipline my own children without feeling like I'm being judged." Yesterday, she gave Emma candy right before dinner, after I specifically asked her not to give the kids sweets before meals. There was a pause as she listened to her mother's response. Then Patricia continued. I know Michael feels bad because she's his mother, but honestly, I feel like we've lost our privacy, our independence. Even when we're in our own bedroom, I feel like we have to whisper because she might hear us. I never feel like I can just relax in my own living room because she might come upstairs at any moment. The words hit me like physical blows. I quietly finished folding my laundry and crept back down to my apartment, my hands shaking as I closed the door behind me. I sat on my small bed, staring at the wall, trying to process what I had just heard. I wasn't a welcome family member helping out with the children and household duties. I was an unwelcome intruder who had invaded their personal space and disrupted their peaceful life. The next few days were torture. Patricia began implementing what she called house guidelines, but what felt like rules designed specifically to limit my presence and involvement in family life. I wasn't allowed in the kitchen during meal preparation times. I couldn't watch television in the living room after 8 p.m. because that was family wind-down time. I was asked to play with the children only in my basement apartment or outside, not in the main living areas where their toys and games were kept. Each new restriction felt like another nail in the coffin of my hopes for a happy multi-generational household. Michael went along with every rule Patricia suggested, never once asking for my input or considering how these limitations made me feel. When I tried to discuss the situation with him one evening, he dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. Mom, Patricia is just trying to maintain some structure and routine for the kids, he said, not even looking up from his laptop. You have to understand that this is a big adjustment for all of us. We need some boundaries to make this work. But the boundaries felt less like reasonable accommodations and more like walls designed to keep me separate from the family I thought I was joining. My health began to suffer under the constant stress. I wasn't sleeping well, lying awake at night, listening to the family moving around upstairs, feeling like an outsider, looking in on their happiness. I lost my appetite, picking at the solitary meals I prepared for myself in my small kitchenette, while the family ate together upstairs. The isolation was becoming unbearable, worse than the loneliness I had felt in my empty house after Frank died. In desperation, I decided to make one final attempt to bridge the growing gap between us. I planned to cook a special Sunday dinner, an elaborate meal featuring all of Michael's childhood favorites, and some new dishes I thought Patricia might enjoy. I spent days planning the menu, making a special trip to the grocery store to buy all the best ingredients. I wanted to show them that I could be a positive addition to their family, that my presence could bring joy and delicious food rather than just complications. But even this gesture of love and hope was destined to fail in the toxic atmosphere that had developed in the house. The day that would change everything started as a typical Saturday morning. Patricia had announced the night before that some of her college friends were coming over for an afternoon get-together, and she wanted the house to be perfect for their visit. I offered to help with the cleaning and food preparation, thinking this might be a chance to contribute positively to the household, but Patricia quickly declined my assistance. Thanks, but I have everything under control, she said, but her tone suggested that my help would be more of a hindrance than a benefit. Actually, it would be really helpful if you could stay in your room during the party. My friends don't know about our living situation, and I'd prefer to keep things simple. The request felt like a slap in the face. I was being asked to hide in my basement apartment like some shameful secret, while Patricia entertained her friends in the home where I was supposedly a welcome family member. But I swallowed my pride and agreed, thinking that maybe this was just a temporary inconvenience and things would get better after her friends left. So, I spent that Saturday afternoon confined to my small apartment, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation filtering down from above. I could hear Patricia's voice bright and animated as she chatted with her friends about their careers, their children's accomplishments, and their vacation plans. The house felt alive with energy and joy, but I was completely excluded from it, treated like an embarrassing relative who needed to be hidden away. The worst part was hearing how happy and relaxed Patricia sounded with her friends, so different from the tense, controlled way she spoke to me. It became clear that the problem wasn't Patricia's personality or her inability to get along with people. The problem was specifically me and my presence in her home. As the afternoon wore on, I heard footsteps on the stairs leading to my apartment. Emma burst through my door, her face flushed with excitement from playing with the other children who had come with Patricia's friends. "Grandma, why are you hiding down here?" she asked with the innocent directness that only children possess. "Mommy's friends are really nice, and there's so much good food upstairs. Don't you want to come up and meet them?" Before I could answer, Emma continued chattering about the party, unknowingly delivering the blow that would push me over the edge. "One of Mommy's friends asked where you were, and Mommy said you were at a senior center for the day. But you're right here. Why did Mommy say you were somewhere else?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Patricia had lied to her friends about my whereabouts rather than simply explain that I lived with them. She was so ashamed or embarrassed by my presence that she had fabricated a story to avoid having to introduce me as Michael's mother who lived in their basement. The humiliation was overwhelming, but it was the final piece of evidence I needed to confirm what I had been trying to deny for weeks. I was not a welcome member of this household. I was a burden they were enduring, an inconvenience they were managing, a problem they were trying to solve. No amount of help with childcare or cooking or household chores would ever change that fundamental reality. When Patricia's friends finally left and the house quieted down, I made a decision. I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells and hiding in the basement like some guilty secret. I deserved better than this, and frankly, Patricia and Michael deserved to have their home and their privacy back without feeling like they had to manage my feelings every day. I climbed the stairs to the main floor, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger, hurt, and determination. Patricia was in the kitchen, cleaning up from the party, humming softly to herself. She looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen her since the first week I had moved in. "Patricia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk about what happened today." She turned around, and I could see the moment she realized I knew about her lie. Her face flushed red, and she began stammering an explanation. "Naomi, I can't explain. It's just that my friends don't really understand complicated living situations, and I thought it would be easier if you pretended I didn't exist," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "If you lied, rather than simply introducing me as Michael's mother." The conversation quickly escalated into the kind of confrontation I had been avoiding for weeks. Patricia's carefully maintained politeness cracked, and all her frustrations came pouring out. "Honestly, Naomi, yes, I feel like I can't breathe in my own home. Every room I go into, you're there. Every decision I make about my children, I feel like you're judging me. Every friend I have over, I have to explain why there's another person living in our house." "I'm not just another person," I said, my voice rising with hurt and anger. "I'm Michael's mother. I'm your children's grandmother. I sold my home and gave up my independence to be here because Michael asked me to." "Well, maybe that was a mistake." Patricia shot back, her composure completely gone now. "Maybe we all made a mistake thinking this could work. I need my space, Naomi. I need to feel like the woman of my own house. I need to be able to parent my children without feeling like I'm being supervised and corrected all the time." That's when Michael walked through the front door, returning from his Saturday afternoon golf game with friends. He took one look at our faces and immediately understood that something serious was happening. But instead of trying to mediate or find a compromise, instead of defending his mother or acknowledging the sacrifices I had made to be there, Michael looked directly at me and delivered the words that would end my time in his house forever. "Mom, we don't have space for you anymore. You need to get out. This isn't working." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my son, the child I had raised alone after his father died when he was 12, the boy I had worked 2 jobs to put through college. The man I had been so proud to see build a successful career and beautiful family. And he was looking at me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. "I see," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." Without another word, I turned and walked back down to my basement apartment, leaving Michael and Patricia to discuss the situation without me. I could hear their voices upstairs quieter now, probably planning how quickly they could help me find somewhere else to live. But I had already made my decision. I would not stay where I was not wanted, and I would not give them the satisfaction of having to ask me again to leave. I spent that night sitting on my bed, staring at the 2 suitcases I had brought with me 6 months earlier, trying to gather the courage to pack them again. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had sold my home, donated my furniture, and condensed my entire life into a few boxes so I could be part of Michael's family, and now I was preparing to take even less with me as I left. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Michael's words echoing in my mind. "We don't have space for you." Not just physically, I realized, but emotionally. There was no space in their hearts, their routines, or their vision of family life for an aging mother who had nowhere else to go. Around 3 in the morning, I heard soft footsteps on the basement stairs. Emma appeared in my doorway, her hair messy from sleep, and her eyes wide with concern. "Grandma, are you okay?" I heard voices earlier, and Mommy looked upset. Lucas appeared behind his sister, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Are you leaving, Grandma? I heard Daddy say something about you going away." Looking at their innocent, worried faces, I felt my heart break all over again. These children had done nothing wrong. They had welcomed me with pure love and excitement, and now they were going to lose their grandmother because the adults in their lives couldn't find a way to make our living situation work. I knelt down and pulled both children into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair and trying to memorize the feeling of their small arms around my neck. "Yes, sweetheart, Grandma is going to find a new place to live," I told them as gently as I could. "But that doesn't mean I won't see you anymore. I'll always be your grandmother, no matter where I live." "But why can't you stay here?" Emma asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Did we do something wrong?" "Oh no, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults just need different living arrangements, that's all." It was the best explanation I could offer without burdening them with the painful truth about their parents' decision. I spent the next few hours helping the children understand that my leaving wasn't about them while quietly packing my belongings. I took only what I could carry in my 2 suitcases, leaving behind the few decorative items and kitchen gadgets I had brought to make the basement apartment feel more like home. As dawn broke on Sunday morning, I heard Michael moving around upstairs, getting ready for his usual Sunday morning run. Part of me hoped he would come downstairs to talk to apologize, or at least to help me figure out where I was going to go. But he didn't. He left the house for his run without saying a word to me, probably relieved to avoid what would inevitably be an uncomfortable conversation. Patricia appeared at the top of the basement stairs around 8 o'clock, looking awkward and guilty. "Naomi about yesterday," she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. "There's nothing more to discuss," I said, surprising both of us with the calmness in my voice. "I'll be out of your way within the hour." "Where will you go?" she asked, and I could hear genuine concern in her voice, though it was far too little and far too late. "I'll figure it out," I replied, closing the second suitcase with a firm zip. I survived on my own for 65 years before I came here. I think I can manage to do it again. I called a taxi from my cell phone, and within 20 minutes, I heard the horn honking outside. Michael had returned from his run by then, but he stayed upstairs, unwilling or unable to face me as I left. Emma and Lucas both came down to the basement to say goodbye, their tears making me question whether I was doing the right thing by leaving so abruptly. But as I carried my suitcases up the basement stairs for the last time, passing through the kitchen, where I had hoped to cook so many family meals, through the living room, where I had dreamed of watching the children grow up, I knew that staying would only make things worse for everyone involved. The taxi driver helped me load my suitcases into the trunk, and as I settled into the back seat, I took one last look at the house I had briefly called home. Patricia stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching me leave. She didn't wave goodbye, but she did watch until the taxi pulled away from the curb. As we drove through their neighborhood, past the playground where I had taken Emma and Lucas so many times, past the small grocery store where I had shopped for ingredients for our family meals, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. The constant tension, the walking on eggshells, the feeling of being unwanted and unwelcome, all of it was finally over. I asked the taxi driver to take me to a small hotel downtown, one of those extended stay places that rented rooms by the week or month. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet, and for the first time in months, it would be entirely mine. No one would make rules about when I could use the kitchen or watch television. No one would ask me to hide in my room when company came over. No one would make me feel like an intruder in my own living space. As I checked into room 214, giving my credit card information to the desk clerk, I realized that I had been so focused on trying to fit into Michael and Patricia's life that I had completely lost sight of what I wanted and needed for myself. Maybe this forced independence was exactly what I needed to remember who I was, beyond just being Michael's mother, or Emma and Lucas's grandmother. The first 24 hours in my hotel room were a mixture of grief relief and growing determination. I allowed myself one good cry, mourning not just the loss of my son's respect and my grandchildren's daily presence, but also the death of the fantasy I had built about our happy multi-generational family. Then I began the practical work of figuring out what came next. I had enough money in my savings account to stay at the hotel for several months while I looked for a more permanent living situation, but I knew I needed to find something sustainable quickly. At 65, I wasn't ready to retire completely, and I realized that I didn't want to. The months of sitting in that basement apartment, feeling useless and unwanted, had shown me how important it was for me to have a purpose and a sense of contributing to the world. On Monday morning, exactly 24 hours after I had left Michael's house, I put on my best dress and decided to take a walk through downtown to get familiar with my new neighborhood. The extended stay hotel was located in an older part of the city full of small businesses and local shops that gave the area character and warmth. That's when I discovered Dorothy's Garden, a small flower shop tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop on Main Street. The window display was beautiful, but obviously maintained by someone with more enthusiasm than professional training. The arrangements were charming, but amateur, and I found myself mentally redesigning them as I stood on the sidewalk looking in. I had always loved gardening and flower arranging. Frank used to joke that I could make anything bloom, and I had maintained beautiful flower beds at our house on Maple Street for over 30 years. As I stood outside Dorothy's Garden, I felt the first spark of excitement I had experienced in months. The bell chimed as I pushed open the door, and I was greeted by the wonderful scent of fresh flowers mixed with potting soil and plant food. An elderly woman emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on a gardening apron. She had to be in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Good morning, I'm Dorothy," she said with a warm smile. "Are you looking for anything special today?" "Actually, I was just admiring your window display," I said, then took a chance. "I'm new to the neighborhood, and I have quite a bit of experience with flower arranging. Your shop is lovely, but I wondered if you might be interested in some help with the displays and arrangements." Dorothy's face lit up immediately. "Oh my goodness, Are you sent from heaven? I've been running this shop by myself for 15 years, ever since my husband died, and I'm getting too old to keep up with everything. The creative part has always been my weakness. I know which flowers go together, but making them look professional and appealing, that's where I struggle. We talked for over an hour, and I learned that Dorothy had been considering selling the shop because she couldn't manage all aspects of the business alone anymore. She had a small apartment above the store that she had been thinking about renting out to supplement her income, and she needed someone with artistic skills to help with the flower arrangements and window displays. By the end of our conversation, Dorothy had offered me a part-time job helping with the creative side of the business and the opportunity to rent the small apartment upstairs at a very reasonable rate. It felt like a miracle, the kind of perfect solution that you never expect to find when your life has been turned upside down. "When can you start?" Dorothy asked, and I couldn't help but laugh. "How about right now?" I replied, already mentally planning how I would reorganize the window display to better showcase the beautiful flowers she had available. I spent the rest of that Monday working alongside Dorothy, learning about her suppliers and regular customers, and beginning to understand the rhythm of the flower shop business. By closing time, we had completely transformed the front window display, and Dorothy was practically glowing with excitement about the possibilities for our partnership. That evening, I called the extended stay hotel and canceled my reservation for the rest of the week. On Tuesday morning, I moved my 2 suitcases into the small but charming apartment above Dorothy's garden. It had a tiny kitchen, a comfortable living area with lots of windows, and a bedroom that was just the right size for one person who valued independence over space. For the first time in months, I felt like I was where I belonged. Dorothy appreciated my skills and experience, and I felt genuinely useful and valued. We worked together beautifully with her knowledge of the business side, complementing my creative abilities perfectly. Meanwhile, back at Michael's house, reality was beginning to set in. Without me there to help with childcare, both Michael and Patricia had to adjust their work schedules to accommodate school pickups and sick days. They quickly discovered how much I had been contributing to the smooth operation of their household, not just financially, by not paying rent, but practically by being available for all the small emergencies and daily tasks that working parents face. On Tuesday afternoon, Emma came down with a fever at school. The nurse called both parents, but Patricia was in an important client meeting and Michael was in a presentation that he couldn't leave. For the first time, there was no grandmother available to handle the crisis immediately. Patricia had to excuse herself from her meeting, potentially damaging an important client relationship, to pick up her sick daughter. That evening, as Patricia sat with Emma, who was still running a fever, Lucas had a complete meltdown about bedtime. He cried and asked repeatedly for his grandma, saying that I was the only one who could read bedtime stories the right way. Michael tried to comfort his son, but Lucas was inconsolable, sobbing that he wanted his grandma to come back home. By Wednesday, the impact of my absence was becoming impossible to ignore. While I was settling into my new life at Dorothy's garden, discovering the joy of creating beautiful arrangements and helping customers celebrate life's special moments, Michael and Patricia were struggling to adjust to the reality of their decision. What they had expected to feel was relief and a return to their pre-Naomi normalcy. What they actually experienced was chaos, guilt, and the growing realization that they had made a terrible mistake. Emma's fever broke on Wednesday, but she was still too weak to go to school. Patricia had already missed one important meeting on Tuesday, and Michael had a crucial deadline at work. They were forced to call in Patricia's mother from 2 hours away to help with childcare, an arrangement that cost them money for gas and meals and created its own set of complications since Patricia's mother had never been comfortable with their children's routines. Lucas continued to ask for me every day. At bedtime, he would cry and refuse to let either parent read to him, insisting that only Grandma Naomi knew how to do the voices for all the characters in his favorite books. During meals, he would stare at my empty chair and ask when I was coming back. Emma tried to be brave, but I could see from the drawings she made at school, pictures of sad families missing their grandmother, that she was struggling too. The financial impact was immediate and significant. Without me there to provide free childcare, Patricia and Michael had to hire a babysitter for the times when their work schedules conflicted with the children's school hours. The cost was substantial, eating into the money they had been saving by not charging me rent. More than the practical challenges, though, was the emotional weight of what they had done. Michael found himself unable to concentrate at work, distracted by memories of my face, when he told me to get out. Patricia struggled with guilt every time the children asked about me, knowing that she had been the driving force behind my departure. On Thursday evening, exactly 4 days after I had left, Michael finally worked up the courage to call me. My phone rang while I was upstairs in my apartment, putting the finishing touches on a beautiful centerpiece arrangement for a wedding Dorothy and I were catering the next day. I looked at the caller ID and saw my son's name. For a moment, I considered not answering. Part of me wasn't ready to hear his voice, wasn't ready to deal with whatever guilt or practical concern had finally motivated him to reach out. But another part of me, the part that would always be his mother, no matter what had happened between us, needed to know that he was okay. "Hello, Michael," I said, keeping my voice neutral and calm. "Mom, His voice cracked, and I could hear the emotion he was trying to control. "I need to know that you're okay. Where are you staying? Are you safe?" "I'm fine, Michael. I found a nice place to live and a job I enjoy. You don't need to worry about me." I kept my response brief and factual, not wanting to get drawn into an emotional conversation before I was ready. "Mom, I think we made a mistake," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "The kids are miserable. Lucas cries for you every night. Emma drew a picture at school of our family, and there's an empty space where you should be. Patricia and I are struggling to manage everything without your help." I felt a mixture of sadness and vindication at his words. Sadness, because I could hear genuine regret and pain in his voice. But vindication, because finally, they understood what they had lost when they threw me out of their lives. "Michael, I appreciate you calling," I said carefully, "but you made your feelings very clear on Sunday. You said you didn't have space for me, and I heard you loud and clear." "But Mom, we do have space for you. Physical space isn't the problem. We were all just adjusting, and maybe we handled it wrong. Maybe we can try again, set up some better boundaries and communication. The kids need their grandmother." I was quiet for a long moment, looking around my small but cheerful apartment above the flower shop. Through my window, I could see the main street below, bustling with people going about their daily lives. I thought about Dorothy downstairs, probably working late to prepare for tomorrow's wedding. Grateful to have a partner who shared her passion for bringing beauty into people's lives. "Michael, I'm glad you called, and I'm sorry the children are upset. But I'm not coming back to live with you." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for several seconds. "Mom, please just think about it. We can make this work. I know we can." "I have thought about it, sweetheart, and the answer is no. I'm not angry with you, but I've realized that I'm happier living independently. I have a job I love, a place of my own, and for the first time in months, I feel valued and respected." When I hung up the phone 10 minutes later, I felt surprisingly peaceful. Michael had asked if he could come see me, and I had agreed to meet him for coffee on Saturday morning. I wanted to maintain a relationship with my son and grandchildren, but it would be on new terms that respected my dignity and independence. On Friday morning, Patricia called. Her voice was shaky, and she was clearly crying. "Naomi, I owe you an enormous apology. I was selfish and thoughtless, and I made Michael choose between his loyalty to me and his love for you. That wasn't fair to any of us." "Patricia, I appreciate your call. I replied, genuinely touched by her obvious distress. I know this situation was difficult for everyone. Will you please consider coming back? I promise things will be different. We can set up a schedule, establish clear expectations, make sure everyone's needs are respected. I explained to Patricia what I had told Michael, that I was grateful for their change of heart, but that I had found something better than what we had tried to create together. I had found independence, purpose, and self-respect. Those things were too precious to give up even for the love of my family. On Saturday morning, I met Michael at a small coffee shop near Dorothy's garden. He looked tired and older than his 42 years, and I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes when he hugged me hello. We talked for nearly 2 hours, and I could see that he truly understood the magnitude of what had happened and how much pain his words had caused. He apologized repeatedly, not just for telling me to leave, but for allowing the situation to deteriorate to that point in the first place. I should have stood up for you, Mom. I should have insisted that we all sit down and work through the problems together, instead of just letting Patricia set all the rules and then backing her up without question. I appreciated his honesty and his willingness to take responsibility for his role in what had happened. But I also helped him understand that this experience, painful as it had been, had taught me something valuable about myself and what I needed to be happy. Michael, for 6 months, I tried to squeeze myself into a space in your life where I didn't really fit. I gave up my independence, my home, my sense of self-worth, all because I thought that being near family was the most important thing. But I learned that being near family doesn't mean anything if you can't be yourself while you're there. We made plans for me to have regular visits with Emma and Lucas, and for all of us to slowly rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation or convenience. It wouldn't be the same as the fantasy I had originally envisioned, but it would be something real and sustainable. As I walked back to Dorothy's garden after our coffee meeting, I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who teach us the hardest truths about our own worth. Sometimes, we have to lose everything we thought we wanted in order to find what we actually need. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is our absence, because it's only when we're gone that they realize what they've lost. I had spent 65 years learning how to be a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. Now, I was finally learning how to be myself, independent and whole, with love to give, but not at the expense of my own dignity and happiness. It had been a painful lesson, but it was also a liberation. That evening, as I arranged flowers for Sunday's church service, I felt a deep sense of contentment and purpose. I was exactly where I belonged, doing work that mattered, living a life that was entirely my own. The relationship with my son and grandchildren would heal and grow in time, but it would be built on a foundation of choice and respect rather than need and obligation. And that, I realized, was the most valuable lesson of all. Love should never require us to diminish ourselves, and family should be a place where we can be our truest, most authentic selves. If it's not, then sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away, not in anger, but in self-respect, and build the life we deserve to live. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping peace and maintaining your self-respect? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart or reminded you to value your own worth, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and finding the courage to stand up for yourself. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you are never too old to start over, and you are never too old to demand the respect you deserve. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never forget your own value.